Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into something today that may seem minor at first glance, but it's actually creating a lot of buzz and raising some serious questions about access to information for everybody.
You hit the nail on the head. It might just seem like a website change on the surface, but the impact goes way deeper, particularly for the millions of Spanish speakers here in the U.S. who depend on that content.
And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We've got a whole bunch of articles here from Yahoo News, USA Today, Local 3 News, and they're all buzzing about this change and what it means for folks like you and me trying to stay informed about what's happening with our government.
Yeah, so let's break down what's actually going on.
Yeah, please do.
The Spanish language version of the White House website, the one at whitehouse.gov, it's just gone, poof,
Yeah.
vanished. And if you try to go there, all you get is that 404 error message, the page not found thing.
The good old 404.
Yeah, exactly. And at first they had a go home button that would send you back to the English homepage, which, yeah, didn't exactly go over well. Let's just say that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, I can see why that does come across as kind of dismissive.
The optics weren't great. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you don't speak English, you don't belong here kind of vibe. They have since changed it to just a plain go to homepage button.
Okay.
But the bottom line is the Spanish content is still nowhere to be found.
So gone. It's just gone.
And the White House, they put out a statement, acknowledging that they took it down, saying they're committed to bringing back online the Spanish translation section of the website.
Okay, so at least they're saying they'll put it back up. But did they say when? Like, give us a date?
Well, that's where things get a little fuzzy. They say it'll be back in a short timeline, and they mention they're doing some editing and tweaking, but no actual dates.
Editing and tweaking sounds pretty vague to me.
Right. It's like they're downplaying how important it is to have that information available in Spanish in the first place.
Almost like it's an afterthought.
And here's the thing. This isn't the first time this has happened. This exact same thing happened when President Trump was in office the first time around, back in 2017.
Oh, really?
He took down the Spanish content then, too. And then when President Biden came in, he put it back up. And now with Trump back in office, it's gone again.
So it's like a back and forth thing.
It is, and it makes you wonder what's really going on here.
What's the motivation behind it, right?
Exactly. Because it's hard not to think about some of the things President Trump has said in the past about English being the primary language in the U.S.,
Yeah.
especially during his first campaign back in 2016.
Right, he was very vocal about that.
He was. And this move, even though they're not saying it directly, seems to line up with that whole idea,
It definitely raises some questions about their priorities.
For sure. It makes you think about the people who really rely on that Spanish language content. What's the impact on them?
Because we're talking about real people, everyday people, trying to live their lives.
Yeah.
Access services, understand what their government is doing.
And there are a lot of people in that boat. Remember, over 43 million Americans speak Spanish at home?
That's a huge number.
It's a big chunk in the population. And for a lot of those folks, the Spanish version of the White House website isn't just a nice to have, it's a need to have.
Yeah, some people really depend on it.
Absolutely. And the articles we've got here really highlight that human side of this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like Monica Rivera, the brand and communications strategist.
Yeah.
She said this makes Latinos feel othered and excluded.
It's like they're being told they don't matter as much.
It's a powerful statement.
It is. And then you have Anthony Hernandez, the paralegal.
Right.
He's worried about people being cut off from important resources, especially immigrants who are trying to do things the legal way. He feels like this is a slap in the face to the millions of Hispanic voters who supported Trump in the last election.
It's like their votes don't count for much, or their needs are being ignored.
And this brings up a really important point. This isn't just about symbolism or representation. It's about real practical stuff that affects people's everyday lives.
Things like healthcare, education, immigration updates, all that stuff can be incredibly difficult to navigate if you don't have access to information in your native language.
Exactly. It creates a real barrier for people.
So it's not just a website. It's about what that website represents.
And who it serves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here? What are the experts saying about all this? We've got some interesting takes from the experts.
Oh, yeah. Frankie Miranda, the president and CEO of the Hispanic Federation.
Right.
He's really emphasizing how important it is to communicate in Spanish if you want to get Latinos engaged in the whole civic process,
Yeah.
It's not just about making things easy for them. It's about making them feel like they're a part of things.
Like your voices are being heard.
Exactly. And then there's Chris Klein Hernandez, the U.S. historian.
Yeah.
She focuses on race and gender and sexuality, and Her point is that taking down this content doesn't just limit access for Spanish speakers, it also sends a message about who the administration really cares about.
Like who they see as valuable and who they don't.
Exactly. It's about the practical stuff, but it's also about the message it sends and how that makes people feel.
Like they're being excluded.
Exactly. And Jeff Lee, who was the deputy cabinet secretary in California, he brought up something I thought was really interesting.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
He thinks this whole thing is kind of counterproductive,
Wow.
especially if they're trying to promote policy changes related to things like the economy or border security.
Which are issues that directly affect Hispanic communities.
Exactly. You'd think they'd want to make that information as easy to access as possible, right?
It seems like taking down the Spanish language content would actually do the opposite.
It does seem to contradict what they say they want to do, which is, engage with these communities.
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher.
It is. So it all comes back to that question of impact. How is this affecting real people, the millions of Spanish speakers who need that information?
Yeah.
Imagine trying to deal with something complicated like healthcare or immigration in a language you're not totally fluent in.
Yeah, even if you know some English, it can be super overwhelming.
You might miss important details or misunderstand something crucial or just feel totally lost in the whole process.
And that's the reality for a lot of Spanish speakers right now.
They're facing this extra hurdle when it comes to accessing essential information and interacting with their government.
And we have to remember, this isn't just some abstract issue. It has real-world consequences for people.
Absolutely. This is about people's ability to get healthcare education, legal help, all sorts of things.
It's about being able to participate in their communities and exercise their rights.
And that's something everyone should care about no matter what language they speak or where they come from.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, what's the big takeaway here? What should our listeners be thinking about?
I think it boils down to this access to information is crucial for a healthy democracy.
If people can't get the information they need, the system can't work properly.
Right. And when access is limited, especially for a big part of the population, it makes you wonder about inclusivity and representation and whether the government is really committed to serving all of its people.
It's like that saying, knowledge is power.
Exactly. Without access to information, people are disempowered.
It's a good reminder that even small changes like updating a website can have a ripple effect.
They can impact people's lives in very real ways.
And it's a call to action for all of us to pay attention to these issues, to speak up for those who are being marginalized, and to demand a government that truly represents and serves all of its citizens.
Yeah, it really makes you think, how something like a website can have such a big impact on people's lives.
You know, one thing that's been sticking with me is how President Trump's actions don't seem to match up with the support he gets from Latino voters.
Right. The AP VoteCast data showed he actually gained more support from Black and Latino voters in the last election, especially young men. It's a real head-scratcher. On the one hand, you have this decision to remove Spanish language content, which seems like it would directly affect Hispanic communities, but then on the other hand, he's getting more votes from those same communities.
Yeah, it's not as simple as saying this policy hurts these voters, so they won't vote for him. There's just so much more to it than that.
Exactly. It's complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Voters think about a lot of different things when they're deciding who to vote for.
It's not always about one single issue.
Right. It could be the economy or social values or even just not liking the other candidates. It's really hard to say for sure what drives those decisions.
It's a good reminder that we shouldn't jump to conclusions or oversimplify things.
We need to be open to different perspectives and try to understand where people are coming from.
If we want to find common ground, we need to actually listen to each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what do we want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the big takeaway is to pay attention to the details.
Mm.
Even something that seems small, like changing a website, can have a ripple effect.
Ask yourself who's being affected by this decision. Who benefits? Who's being left out?
And how do these decisions, whether they're big or small, shape how we see the world around us? How do they affect who we think belongs, who we think matters, and whose voices get heard?
Those are some really great questions.
And the answers might be different for everyone, depending on their own experiences and what they believe.
But the important thing is to be asking those questions, to be talking about these issues, and to be working towards the kind of world we want to live in.
So to all our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive has gotten you thinking and encouraged you to look deeper into things.
Remember the power of language and representation.
And how even small choices can make a big difference.
Stay curious. Keep asking those tough questions and never forget that your voice matters.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another look at the issues that matter.